Say the truth hurts, so you bout to feel pain, and I gotta do work. God said I gotta do work, cause it's off with the name, savage truth. Savage truth, it's the savage truth, the savage truth.
Welcome to the Savage Truth. I am Pastor Roy Dockery, and thank you for joining me for another episode, another podcast, wherever you're going to consume this content, whether it's visibly or audibly. I appreciate you, and thank you for joining us. So make sure you share the content. I never really say this because I'm horrible at promotion and marketing in general, which is why I'm not on social media. But yeah, share the content, right? If there's a video that you like, if there's something that was said here that you think would resonate with people in your circle, feel free to share it. I'm not anti-social media. I'm just not on social media. I'm busy. I got things to do. My wife is on social media. That's who runs the Pastor Roy Dockery Facebook page. So yeah, share the content out there. Tell people to come to the community. Encourage them to join our Discord community where we can engage and communicate in a more private, isolated fashion, right? So that you bring here what you want to bring here. We ain't got to live our whole lives in front of people. We ain't sharing what we had for lunch in the Discord channel, but we do share life together and we grow from there. But one thing that I want to talk about today, and I will drop this in February, is Black History Month. So let's have a Black conversation. You know what I mean? And I think there's something that a lot of people need to hear because you need to understand some of the dynamics behind this. And so what I want to talk about is how, as a minority, especially as a minority leader, an executive, individual contributor, whatever, but when you're a minority in a space, how do you deal with or try to overcome what people would call tokenism, right? And so the concept of tokenism, really, which can be real or perceived, is kind of this idea that like they only brought in a Black person to look diverse, right? So to give the superficial appearance of diversity, they'll bring in, even you have some companies, right, that are hiring a diversity and inclusion executive, and that is the only minority executive at the company. They have no real power and they have no department, no resources, and an insignificant budget, right? So people would look at that as tokenism, right? Like I'm bringing you in as a token of the recognition of diversity being a problem. But what does that do to the minority, right? That might seem good for the movement. That might be good PR for the company. But when you are that minority, when you're that woman, when you're that Black person, when you're that Hispanic, when you're that Asian person who's being brought in to create this topical ointment of diversity, like, how do you manage that? Like, how do you deal with that? And even as a company, how do you make sure your genuine approaches to try to create diversity and inclusion in your organization don't become topical, superficial only, right? And in that, there's kind of two things that I want to differentiate, and that's the difference between tokenism and what I'm going to like. It's the difference between being a token and being a totem, right? And I'll dive into that a little bit. And I might write a book about this. So y'all let me know how you feel about the subject, and I might go deeper into it because I'm not going to be able to get there in the time that I'll do this video. But right, like a token is just right, when you think about a token, right? You think about a token for a video game. You think about a token to get on a subway, right? Tokens are normally something that gain you like access and passage, or it's a memorial, right? Like it's, you have a coin. Like when I was in the Navy, we would have coins from different ships and different things. So like a token is normally kind of symbolic, right? And that's the thing. Like you don't want the hiring of a minority, or you don't want your job as an executive, as a manager, as a director, as whatever, to be symbolic. Like you want it to be because you add value. You want it to be because the organization that you're a part of is trying to change the narrative, right? That they're trying to they're trying to drive a new story forward. Excuse me. And that's when it comes to the idea of being a totem instead of a token. And some of this is how you feel internally, and some of it is how the organization allows you to maneuver and change their narrative. See, because when you think about a totem, like totems in different places, but, especially in North America, like totems in Native American history, like the purpose of totems were to tell stories. So when you looked at a totem, it might just look like a work of art or a sculpture, but like the different faces and the different animals and the different things within that totem, it was telling a narrative, right? So when someone in that tribe would tell a story, like they could tell you a story about that totem that explains each layer in each level of that totem pole. So the question is, for an organization, for an individual, like, is somebody bringing you in to be a symbol, to just be a identification of recognition, or is somebody bringing you in to make you a part of the story of the organization, right? Because when you think all the way back to the civil rights movement and Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, right? There were schools that did not want a black student to be a part of the narrative of their school, so they fought against integration. But there were schools, but then you had you had like the Ruby Bridges, right? That you became a totem. Ruby Bridges became a totem in the story of integration because of how her story, how her narrative was driven through that movement. So if you have a organization, if you have a business, if you have a church, right? Anything, a nonprofit, a corporation that's trying to change their narrative. If they have a narrative of being a white male-led organization and they're trying to change that narrative, you can't change that narrative without bringing in non-white males, right? But if you're really not trying to change that narrative, you're trying to change the public perception, the topical perception of your organization as one that's no longer led by older white males. So you bring in a young woman. If that woman doesn't have the ability to influence the narrative, if that black man or that Hispanic man or woman or that Asian man or woman, if they don't actually have the ability to change the story, then you're using them as a token and not as a totem, right? Because you can have a history of an organization that for the longest, right, that totem is just white men, right? But if you're using a woman, if you're using an African-American male, if you're using an African-American female, right? Even if you're using somebody from an underrepresented community like LGBTQ, right? Like if you're using them on that totem, and it should be because you're trying to create a broader, more dynamic narrative story for your company that talks about the different periods of change, right? So if me becoming one of the first black executives as a company doesn't create opportunities and create an environment where you start seeing more minorities in leadership, right? Whether it's black men, if it's women, like whatever the dynamic is, if that isn't the beginning, right? If that isn't the totem level that now shifts the conversation to another narrative, then you were using me as a token. You used me as a symbolic measure to pass a superficial topical test of we're not all white men. Right? And then you learn that, right? Maybe they bring in a white woman, but you've passed the gender test in diversity, but like, are you willing to bring voices outside of white culture? Because you can have people who give themselves diversity credits for having women in leadership, but you can have still all white leadership if the woman that you hired is a white woman. So now you have a white male and a white female perspective in your leadership, but you don't have the perspective of anybody outside of outside of a majority white culture, even though you can have people within white culture, right, that have variations as well, because we're all different individuals. But you need to be expanding that and understanding some of the dynamics of other cultures as well. So that's when maybe the next totem comes. So maybe your first step in diversity was bringing women into the organization. Maybe your next step in diversity is bringing a man of color into the organization. Maybe then your next step is to bring a woman of color, or whatever that progression is, right? There should be totems that identify that. Who founded the company? That's that first totem. Right? And then how that company progressed. And then when that company identified or recognized that there was something they should do, what was that next step? Who was the next person that came in? And so as a totem, though, that means my presence, that means my existence should be changing the narrative, should be changing the story of the organization. And if it's not, if you're not influencing the culture, if you don't see more minorities getting hired in positions of power, if you still only see people who are brown, moving boxes or cleaning floors, but you're sitting in the corner office, then you are probably being tokenized, right? Because if you're not represented, right? If you don't see other minorities represented within the organization, then you as a totem should be trying to understand that part of the story. Because why did the narrative of the story end with them acquiring you, right? And the one thing that sometimes we miss the disconnect, right? That some of us live in a token mentality thinking we're a totem because we see ourselves as a unicorn, right? So we're like, oh, there aren't that many minorities in this space, and that's why I'm in. But no, like you have to go look at the root cause, right? Use an applications engineering kind of brain, because why aren't there many minorities in this space? Were there limitations? Were there barriers to entry in certain industries and certain types of education that would have precluded people from coming down this path that you ended up at? So maybe there are other things that we need to change. But when we look at ourselves as special, this is when the token and totem can run into conflict, because you see yourself as a totem. Yes, I'm the first Black person to make it into this, this role at this company. And then you start feeling, though, that you deserve it, right? That you deserve it. There's something unique and special about you as a Black person that maybe other Black people have not achieved. And it's an arrogant kind of perspective, right? Like maybe other people didn't work as hard as me. People didn't, didn't go to the right schools. People didn't make the right choices. People didn't take advantage of the right opportunities. That is an arrogant approach, right? So if you've landed in a position of leadership and don't realize that you are changing the narrative story of an organization, and you've got to make sure that you continue to change that story for other people who look like you, for other people who are marginalized and are not represented in your company, then you are a part of the problem and you are the token, right? Because you're happy being symbolic, but because you've made yourself a symbol, right? You've allowed that success, you've allowed this level of promotion to make you feel special. I know Black people who are in leadership that advocate to not hire that many other Black people. They don't say it that way, right? But you can tell they feel like they're special. They're a different kind of person, right? They reach this, they reach this circumstance by pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps. And if other people wanted to get here, they can do the same. They're not coming through a door and trying to keep it open. They're coming through a door and closing it because they feel like they have arrived. That's when tokenism and and a lack of self-awareness and appreciation for diversity, but that's when it just becomes a perfect storm. Because you can have a company that internally is being told that it's doing everything it can for diversity, because you have somebody from a diverse background, from an underrepresented group, basically telling them that it's okay for the door to be closed, or for the bar to be higher, or for the standard to be unachievable, because, hey, I got here, I overcame these hurdles, why can't other people do the same, right? So that's a problem that we have to address within organizations. But if you're a person, right, who is a minority, who's in a company, what I want to encourage you to do is to be a totem. Be a part of the story. Right? Be someone who continues to drive a narrative that even if I was the only Black person that showed up, I don't want that to be a footnote. I want that to be a beginning of another chapter. Right? Because it can be a footnote in the broader story of the organization. We were going along for 100 years and we had no minorities in leadership, and then we had one, and then we just kept doing what we were doing before. Because from a PR perspective, we met we checked the box, right? We're not all white anymore. We're not all male anymore. We're not, even if we're not all Black anymore. We're not all Hispanic. We're not all Asian. That's not what we should be doing. Like, if you're going to be a totem, you cannot allow your inclusion to be a footnote. You've got to allow your inclusion to be a new chapter of what leadership looks like, a new chapter of how we perceive what it requires to make it to that stage. And more than anything, you need to be honest. Right? You need to be honest about mirroring. You need to be honest about the imposter syndrome. You need to be honest about the uncomfortable things that people say. You need to be honest about the microaggressions. You need to be honest about the political climate. You need to be honest about the corporate culture. You need to be honest, because if you're honest, that gives the organization a chance to change their narrative. If you don't, then they will continue to be the same, because they're trying, but they don't know what they're doing wrong. So as a Christian, and as anybody out there, as a genuinely honest person, if that's what you choose and desire to be honest. It's uncomfortable, but sometimes you got to have uncomfortable conversations. I did a book review on crucial conversations. Sometimes you got to have crucial conversations. Some of those don't need to take place in the boardroom. Some of them need to take place one-on-one, but some stuff need to go to human resources. Some things need to be documented. Some policies need to be changed and updated, so that people can feel included and can feel safe, right? To be present in an organization, but to feel like you're on an island. Like a lot of people can't relate to that, right? Like a lot of people don't know what it feels like to be a majority, to be in the minority constantly, to constantly be surrounded by people who don't look like you, to be constantly surrounded by people that share different interests and priorities than you. It is a draining exercise. Our brain naturally looks for patterns. We look for patterns in speech. We look for patterns in colors. We look for patterns in people. I wear glasses. I notice people who wear glasses and people who do not wear glasses just because my brain is looking for a pattern. It looks for people who have glasses on because I wear glasses. When I'm in a room, when I'm in a space, I look for other black people because most of the time when I'm in a space, I am a minority. When I'm on a plane, I can almost tell you every flight that I've been on how many black people are on a plane because out of 270 people, there's not normally more than 10 black people on a flight. No matter where I go, domestically, internationally, right? And if it is, it's like a shock to me. Like, what? There's like, I remember I flew to Vegas one time. It was like 30 black people on the plane. I thought I was on Soul Plane. I didn't know what happened because it does not typically happen. And it's not because I'm looking for race everywhere. It's because my body, my brain recognizes patterns. I can tell you how many people on a plane have on Jordans. I can normally tell you how many people on a plane have on Beats earphones or some other kind of Harman Kardon expensive kind of headset because I like headphones and audio technology, right? Like there are certain things that my brain recognizes. But when I'm constantly in a space where I am the only one, I am the only black male, I am the only black executive, I'm the only black speaker, right? I'm normally in that space so often. I did an event last year. I looked at the people on the list that were speaking, and one of the topics was diversity and inclusion. And I scanned through the list of like 100 plus speakers. I was the only black male speaker out of over 100 people. And one of the key topics was talking about diversity. And it's just like, it is like, if you don't know that, right? Just go to the space that you can find when you were a minority, when you were the only woman in the room, or you were the only white male in a room, when you were the only older person in the room. Just remember that discomfort that you felt in that moment when you recognized you were a minority, and then exacerbate it by basically an existence. Right? Because unless I'm in a majority black space, black people are less than, 12 to 13% of the population. I am always in the minority unless I'm in a majority black community. So that's something we have to understand. But you have to make a decision. Because if you're in an organization and you feel like you're being tokenized, they really don't allow you to have a voice. They don't allow you to contribute to and to help direct the story of the organization. Then it is your responsibility to not be used as a topical ointment for diversity. Go somewhere else. But if you're at an organization who's trying, right, who's listening, who's willing, they might be moving slow, but they're trying, right? Then make sure you're a totem. Make sure that the story of that organization and its progression towards diversity can't be told without you in it. Right? Make sure that you become a voice of the company and the culture in the way that it's transitioning, not that you just become something that's in their marketing and promotional materials. Because if they want to use your face but won't listen to your voice, find another place to work. Right? If they want to check off the box to have diversity and they want to have a veteran on staff and and all of that stuff, they give you good points, but then they don't want to talk about veteran issues and mental health and PTSD, then find you another job. If they want to have you on the board or a part of their organization as a woman, but they don't want to talk about gender issues, they don't want to talk about pay equity, they don't want to talk about maternity leave and paternity leave and things that impact women and mothers specifically, then you need to find another organization. And if they want to put you on the flyers and the pamphlets and put you in the board because you have a black face, but when something happens in the black community, when something happens that allows an organization to choose to take an opportunity to say that Black Lives Matter, right? To say that injustice is a problem, to say that police brutality is a problem, even though all police are not bad people, right? When they're afraid to speak on your behalf, then that means they don't see you as a part of their story. Because they can't leave out speaking if they see you as a part of the story, right? Because what's happening in the world is impacting you. And if you are a part of the company, right? When something happened to America on 9/11, every company became patriotic because every company saw itself as American, right? Like every company had some tie to that, right? And so that's the same thing. Like when we see something happen that's disproportionately affecting African Americans or Hispanics or women, we should have that same response, right? Because as a company, we should be representing women. As a company, we should be representing Hispanics. In Latinx individuals. As a company, we should be representing Black people. So when anything happens that impacts any of us, it impacts all of us. And if they just want you to be on the brochures, but they won't give you voice, like I said in the other categories, find a new company. Because staying in place is giving them a false flag. Staying in place is giving them a false sense of accomplishment. Staying in place is making them complacent. So sometimes leaving is the disruption that's required. That's one thing that's not being talked about a lot in the Great Resignation, right? We're talking about people leaving, but we're not talking about how people don't have to deal with microaggressions working remotely. And that's why they're not coming back to your company, because your office culture is kind of racist. And you don't know that. Because the people that you have who are minorities either don't feel comfortable enough to speak, or they're just taking up space, or they have spoken and you didn't listen. You brushed it off, or, oh, that's just that guy, or, oh, he was just joking. But that's why some of your people don't want to come back in the office. They don't want to deal with the unwelcomed advances from coworkers that don't take no as an answer or don't seem to catch a hint, right? They don't want to deal with the microaggressions and comments on their hair or people trying to touch it, so they would rather work from home. These are all things that you don't think exist in your company culture. They do. And that's why some of your minorities don't want to come back to work. We just want to work at home because it's peaceful, right? I don't have to, deal with everybody trying to tell me their latest cool thing that they know black people did when we're at the water cooler. Because why would I care? Or why do you think I care, right? Do you know me well enough to know what I'm interested in, or you just think I'm interested in all things black? So that, especially after George Floyd, right? We don't want those awkward conversations at the water cooler. So some of us just would rather go get water from our refrigerator at home and do our jobs, right? And then live our lives and have relationships with people who take the time to understand and to know us. So that's my message. I know that was 20 minutes. That's kind of short for my podcast listeners, long for the YouTube followers. But I hope you guys listened. I will share this on my professional networks and LinkedIn, because I think it's something that needs to be said and something that people need to hear. But be a totem, not a token. And if somebody doesn't allow you to tell your story, if you don't become a part of the story of change, then change jobs and be a part of somebody else's story. So thank you for joining us. I am Pastor Roy. This is The Savage Truth. Love you. If you're not in the Discord channel and you're still here 20 minutes into the conversation, please join the Discord. We have great conversations there, good community and fellowship, and all of that good stuff. You can join the Patreon to support, and also go grab some Savage Truth merch. Get you a Make Racism Illegal hoodie, get you a I'm a Christian t-shirt or whatever. All the stuff comes back into the business to support the things we do in the community, and to keep things moving forward. So God bless y'all. Hope y'all have a great day. Peace out.
They keep asking who I am, I just tell them I'm a Christian. Occupation, a description, I just tell them I'm a Christian. Nationality, ethnicity, I tell them I'm a Christian. Keep the hyphens in division.